What's going on, folks? So this is not a review video. Today we're more talking about a rifle that I purchased and the reason why I set it up this way. So it's kind of a conversation more about usage context and fitting form to function more than the review of any specific product. So this is I call it my critter getter rifle. It's basically for varmint hunting, for plinking, for teaching new shooters at the range who have never fired a gun before. This is the perfect gun, I think, to start somebody on. It's a perfect gun to bring out when you're going camping, to just shoot cans with. Maybe you're gonna go rabbit hunting or squirrel hunting. It's a great gun for that. So the base of the gun is a Ruger 1022. Why a 22? Well, this is going to be a pretty basic video, so a lot of you guys probably already know this. 22 basically has no recoil. The ammo is really cheap, it's comfortable, it's easy to shoot. Now you can find 22 ammo just about everywhere. 2013, not so much. There was a bit of an ammo scare and it took a long time for the market to replenish itself. Now, really common, really easy to find. It's cheap, no recoil. It's not inherently accurate, but it's actually not super bad. Now, you're definitely not going to use it for any sort of precision shooting, but for any plinking application, for most basic target shooting stuff, it's good enough if you keep the range reasonable. So I went with the Ruger 1022. There are a couple other good 22s out there. Savage has one that I like, Marlin has one that I like, but I think the Ruger 1022 is kind of America's sweetheart when it comes to rimfire. It's probably the most popular 22 out there, so I'm definitely not breaking new ground. I'm not coming up with any new idea at all. I think the 1022 is a great platform, just because it's super cheap. A lot of them you can find for $200 to $300, and that's about where I got this at. So normally, for $200, you can get just like the regular wood stock, which is basically just a glorified 2x4 that's been shaped pretty roughly, or just the black plastic stock. Now this was on clearance. I think it was a limited production SKU, and I really like Multicam. I've got a lot of my camo stuff set up in Multicam, and so when I saw a Multicam 1022, I just kind of had to have it. So I got the Ruger 1022. It comes with the flip up rear sight. Now there are a whole lot of different versions of the 1022. Some of them have a flip up rear sight, some of them have a fixed sight, like a buckhorn style sight, kind of like this one is. This is like a modified buckhorn with that big diamond there. Some of them it's a ramp style. I think you can even now get just a plain barrel that doesn't have a rear sight, but it only just has a setup for a scope. Now, I found that the iron sights on this are decent, and if you're just plinking around target shooting, you know, they're fine. They're as accurate as the gun is, so there's not really a whole lot extra to be desired in sights for the 1022. Now it is just a black steel rear sight. Get it to focus here. It's a black steel rear sight, and then the front sight has a very, very small brass bead. But the visibility isn't great, but that lets it be precise enough. So the Ruger 1022 is super cheap. It's lightweight, it's compact, it's a 16-inch barrel, so that's the minimum legal rifle length barrel. And again, for a 22, that's accurate enough. Now the optic I put on here is a TRUGLO TruBrite 30, which means it has a 30mm tube, and this is the 1:4x. Originally, I actually had a red dot on this 1022 just because I wanted it for plinking. I'm not going to be taking this thing out at long ranges. I just wanted it for, like I said, shooting cans, shooting targets, maybe rabbit hunting, maybe squirrel hunting. I'm going to probably keep most of my shots at about 25 yards, at most 50 yards, 75 yards would be stretching it. So not long range. So I had a red dot on there originally, and that was incredibly fast. It was incredibly fun to shoot. But then I realized to actually try to do some hunting with this rifle, I'm most likely going to be hunting small game with the 22. And so that's why I wanted to be able to see smaller targets better. I didn't want to just throw a 40 grain 22 bullet in the general direction of a rabbit. I wanted to be able to shoot a rabbit in the head. I wanted to be able to shoot a squirrel in the head. And so that's why I found a 1:4 is a great option for this. You can dial it out to 1x, and it is a true 1x if your diopter is set right. Now that's important because if your vision's way off and you have to do a massive correction with your diopter, you're going to get enough distortion that it's not necessarily going to be a true 1x. But it's approximately 1x for most people. Or you can crank it into 4 and have a little bit more precision. So whether you want speed or a little bit of precision, an optic like this is a great option for the purpose of this rifle. This optic is also about $100, which is great. The click adjustments in here, take off this turret. A lot of threads on here. It's a half MOA, so roughly a ½ inch at 100 yards. And that's fine because, again, I don't need any more precision than that for the type of ranges I'm shooting at. Because 1/2 MOA means one click is a 1/4 inch at 50 yards. One click is an 1/8 inch at 25 yards. I don't need any more precision than that. We're talking one click is essentially the width of the bullet at 25 yards. That's all the precision I need out of this rifle. Now, I was kind of a sucker for the Ruger 1022 case. And yeah, it's cool because it says Ruger on it and it fits the rifle perfectly. And I think it looks good. It's a good looking case. Honestly, I think this is probably made by Allen Co. or one of those companies that just makes these cheap kind of ballistic nylon cases. But what I liked about this case is that it fit the rifle perfectly. It was hard to find a rifle that was tall enough to put an optic on it, but still short enough that it wasn't like a long shotgun sleeve or deer rifle sleeve, that the rifle would be loose and sliding around. So yeah, I was kind of a sucker for it, and so I went and bought the Ruger 1022 case. But you know what? This case was probably, I don't know, $20, $25 at Dick's Sporting Goods. So I wouldn't pay a whole bunch of money for this, so I'm glad it was cheap because it's a perfect fit. It's an easy fit. Now it's got some pockets in here. You can keep maybe your ear protection, your eye protection, and yes, I do still use ear protection with the 22 most of the time. Sometimes I kind of forget. I'm bad about it, like if I'm hunting, something like that. But usually if I'm at the range, people are going to be shooting other bigger guns, and 22 can still damage your hearing. So I do usually bring ear protection with me. So it's got these pockets in here for ear protection, eye protection, ammo, mags. I kind of wish they were a little bit bigger because you can't really fit much in these, but it's better than not having pockets. So for the cheap price I paid for this case, it works pretty well. So that brings me to mags. This rifle came with one 10-round rotary magazine. So this design is pretty interesting. It's almost like a revolver in that it's got an internal rotating cylinder inside of this box. And it's hard to make rimfire magazines that cycle very reliably. And this is just kind of a system that's a bit different from most like centerfire handgun or rifle rounds that Ruger found as a solution to that problem, to getting rimfire rounds to cycle reliably and easily. So it's just plastic, but it does have steel feed lips, really big chunky steel feed lips at that. And that's important because I've tried several aftermarket mags in this rifle and the vast majority of them have really sucked. The one that I thought was going to be good that ended up not working well at all was the Butler Creek Hot Lips magazine. It's just basically another long extended magazine. Normally it's 25 rounds. They may have other sizes as well. The one I had was 25. And I thought it was going to work really well because it looked just like the Ruger extended magazine. But the feed lips are different. They're just plastic, just like a hard polycarbonate. They're not the steel feed lips. and I don't know what it was about the spring inside there too, but it's just like the follower that loads the magazine, so it's kind of hard to explain. So you have the rotary magazine at the top, but all the extended ones, it kind of extends almost like a double stack magazine. And so it feeds normally till it gets to the rotating part, and then that's when it becomes a rotary magazine. And just Butler Creek, I had hopes that it was going to work, but it just failed on me time after time after time. So I ended up getting the Ruger BX25 magazine. I have actually not ever had a single issue with this that I would really blame the magazine on. I've had a couple times where it's failed, then I've looked at the ammunition and I've realized, oh, the bullet was kind of squashed or the case has a dent in it, something like that. But I would actually have no failures to fire that I think I could accurately and fairly blame on this magazine. So I would say if you are gonna get a 1022 and set it up kind of like this, stick with the Ruger magazines. Now I currently only have 2. It would be cool to get a couple more of these, but it's not like this is a home defense gun. It's not like this is a tactical rifle where I'm needing to do fast reloads or anything like that. So honestly, this is fine for when I go hunting or anything like that. I'm not gonna need more than 10 rounds in a hurry. And then when I'm at the range, if I'm just plinking, if I'm target shooting, well, this guy's a whole lot of fun. So stick with these Ruger magazines. They're kind of expensive. I was kind of grumpy at how much they cost for a simple 22 magazine, but it's worth it just because you're gonna save yourself a lot of pain and a lot of frustration by having a magazine that works accurately. And 22, well, really any rimfire round is pretty dirty. So it's gonna be harsh on your action. It's gonna be harsh on your magazine. So it's worth having this stuff set up and good to go so that, you know, whenever you're shooting, it just makes it that much better. That kind of brings us on to ammo. There's only really 2 different types of ammo that I run through this gun. My preferred ammo choice is CCI. Now this is just the 22 long rifle standard velocity. They have a high velocity round as well. I think this is the, what weight is this? 40 grains, which is pretty typical. I think you can get 22 commonly in 34, maybe it's 32, something like that. But 40 grains is a very common weight, and I have had incredible success with just regular CCI standard velocity 22 ammo. The mini mags work well, the stingers work well, and all of those are basically just higher velocity versions of this same thing. They're just loaded a little bit hotter. It is dirty, but all rimfire ammo is dirty. That's just the process of making rimfire. So I've had good luck with this ammo, and what's cool is it's pretty cheap. It's not the cheapest. I would say generally the cheapest 22 long rifle ammo that you're gonna find in big box stores, whether that's Walmart or Academy or Dick's Sporting Goods or Bass Pro or whatever, it's gonna be the Remington Golden Bullets, and I would say avoid them. I've used them a couple times. They've shot with about the same accuracy as this, but reliability was not as good. And I just think they don't do quite as good a job at cleaning their cases, stuff like that. And for all I know, it's manufactured in the same factory. I don't know, maybe it is, but there's something different about the processing of the Remington Golden Bullets. And this CCI seems to work really well. I've also had pretty good success with just the Federal Game Shock. And they market this as more of a hunting load, but really it's the exact same ballistically, well, I mean close enough, to these CCI standard velocities, but it's actually, open this up here, it's a copper jacketed bullet, or a copper plated. I don't know if there's really like a jacket on there. So it's copper on top. It's not a hollow point. It's just a solid point, but they're soft enough that they will definitely squish and expand. And it's marketed as a hunting load, but you know what? They're so cheap. A box of this stuff is probably $3.99. I got it on sale, so I probably paid about $3.99. I think normally it's probably about $4.99. But you know, unless you're shooting a ton of 22, that's a pretty reasonable price to just go shoot a box of this at the range and not be worried about it. So those are the two types of ammo I would recommend for this 10-22. One thing I kind of didn't cover earlier is that this particular 10-22 actually came with a step-off rail. It came with a rail that was set as a Picatinny rail, but then it had a smaller 3/8 inch dovetail on top. And that's because a lot of rimfire scopes and airgun scopes, kind of the standard for a long time, was that 3/8 inch dovetail. And you can even go look at a Daisy BB gun and it'll most likely have that 3/8 inch dovetail on the top. Now, with kind of as tactical accessories started expanding and Picatinny rails became more popular on hunting rifles and underneath handguns and on all sorts of things, the acceptance of a Weaver or Picatinny rail on a 10-22 or any 22 really is becoming a little bit more common. So the rail that was on here, it looked all right, but it wasn't a high quality rail. So I definitely put a better rail on here. Now this is not some expensive fancy rail. It's not a Vorquartzen or any brand like that. Honestly, I think it's like a Leapers rail, but it was a little bit better than the one that came on here. And what's important is I also sanded the bottom of this rail just to kind of smooth it out a little bit. And when I installed it, I used Loctite. So this rail actually has a really good, solid, firm hold. And if you're going to use Loctite on any sort of application like that, I use red Loctite just because I'm not going to be taking that rail off. If you're going to use Loctite on any kind of application like this, if you're not going to take it off, go ahead and use the red Loctite. It's going to really hold it on there solid. And if you're going to take it off, well, make sure you're using good screws because you're going to have to torque those suckers like crazy to get that off. So use good screws so that you don't strip them if you're taking it off. If you think you're not sure about your setup and you might be taking that rail back off, go ahead and use the blue Loctite. That's kind of a non-permanent hold, but it'll still increase the hold of those screws. Something else that's valuable, let me pull out my scale over here. Unloaded with the rail and the scope, oh, error, got a 0 at first. 5 pounds, 6 ounces with the scope. So this is probably about a pound of that is the scope. So it's incredibly lightweight. That means people who have never shot a gun before can hold this and shoot this easily. Now normally as you decrease weight, you increase the felt recoil on a gun. But on a 22, it's got so little power, and in a gas blowback off action, that's not really an issue. So it's just a really good gun for just entry-level shooters or somebody who's just wanting something just to learn how to shoot or just to play with. I mean, it's not a toy, but it's fun to learn how to shoot and to competitively shoot at cans or even to go small game hunting. It's just a fun rifle. It's fun to take camping. It's fun to take plinking. It's fun to use to teach people to shoot when they've never shot before. So I would recommend the 10-22 and a setup similar to this for those purposes. You don't really need a 3-9 hunting scope for most applications of a 22. Now, is there anything wrong with having one? No, but I think that 9X is going to be more accurate than the rifle is or than you are going to be with this rifle, most likely. Now, that being said, there are some crazy 10-22 builds out there. There are people who have replaced the stock, who have replaced the trigger, and this trigger, it's not great, but it'll get the job done. And this is just the factory trigger, and I think I'm going to leave it in there. Even though you can get better triggers, just because for my purposes, it's just fine. So it's just a fun rifle, a fun little project, and something that I like to, that I like to use to introduce new shooters to the sport. So if you have questions about this 10-22 or kind of what I use it for, or just general discussion about this rifle or the critter getter rifle concept, go ahead and comment below. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.